Hi everyone, welcome to Lifelong Learning in the Arts. I'm Kelly Williams here at the Cleveland Museum of Art. I hope you're having a really wonderful day. And I hope our technology is up and running today because we have a guest back who we have tried to get a few times before, but because of technology glitches, we're going to give it the old college try today, right, Nina?
We are.
And Nina Gibans is someone that we've met quite a few times through Silver Apples of the Moon project, which you worked on. And also you are presenting this series of lectures on Cleveland artists and regional art. So Nina, which section of regional art will we be looking at today?
Well, way back when we last met, we were up to about 1950, from about 1900.
That's right.
So today, we're going to whip through the rest of the century.
Perfect. So about 52 years in 50 minutes.
That's right.
We can do it.
Can we do it?
Yes,
I think we can.
I think we can do it.
Well, I thought what I'd do in the beginning is sort of review what happens around 1950, just after the World War, and set the scene for us without a lot of visuals first.
Okay.
So we talked about the Cleveland School. Remember the Cleveland School, which was primarily the Cleveland Institute of Art people.
Right.
Faculty. We have wonderful paintings that we showed from them, and they were a very tight-knit community of artists, teachers, patrons, cheerleaders. They were very vigorous over the first part of the century. But things began to change after World War II. The larger world of the art of New York, the art world of New York City changed. The institutional world here changed. The art world in the region changed. Later in the decades, we're going to try 52 years here, later in the decade of the century, the infrastructure of the art scene experienced profound changes as new artists came to this region and stayed to develop and nurture. Well, World War II created a global art picture. European artists came to New York City. Unprecedented numbers of regional artists gathered around the immigrant artists whose ideas and styles excited them. And here, perhaps you recognize the name Joe McCullough. He led the way after 1952 when he became assistant director of the Cleveland Institute of Art. Fresh from his experiences at Yale as a student and teacher and colleague of Joseph Albers. Now, Albers is very important. He's a colorist. He led the way and changed the experience of the students here so that his color and light courses taught students here about the complex quality of color and light and opened the way to new thinking and bridged the way to the past and present, between the past and present. So that's Joe McCullough. We'll come back to him in a minute. The other kinds of things that happened is that, faculty positions opened up in colleges and universities throughout the region, offering art studio courses, and new perspectives, new voices were about to be heard. Many of the artists who came here to fill those positions, and we're talking about 1970, 80 now, are still here, and because they found it such a good place to work and used it as a fulcrum for their arts and life. Some have sought experiences elsewhere for their own development, but many would gravitate back here and we'd see them again.
And because the cost of living is so good, right?
That's right. They say that. They really do. With the development in the 1960s of things like the National Endowment for the Arts, Ohio Arts Council, very rarely do we think about when they came into the picture. And they became wonderful support organizations, and especially for artists. So from the 70s on, we also had NOVA, remember the new organization for visual arts? We had Spaces, 1972 is when they started, and the Center for Contemporary Art started in 1972. And they've become very important advocates and exhibitors of regional's most talented artists as they work from their first experiments through to their mature work. In the 1980s and 90s, maybe this happened so that we don't even realize it, but about 50 collections developed in corporations, in banking halls, in law offices, in hospitals, clinics, corporate facilities, and they embraced mainly regional art. those patrons, I say that they're like the Medicis, and for the artists from whom they purchased many hundreds of pieces, it represented new regional support, and in many cases, the down payment for homes to keep them here. They tell us that. Competitions for public artwork included regional artists. So with this global leap over several decades, it's fun and instructive to look at what happened. In 1950, Carl Gertner's Storm...
We'll bring that up in one second.
Won first prize in the May show.
There it is. This is it, right?
And on the Storm King. It's a wonderful opaque watercolor. It typifies the work of the Cleveland School at this time. Artists were painting landscapes, many industrial scenes. Their work was highly competent, but certainly hardly controversial in terms of technique, subject, or content. They were the Cleveland School. They were not the New York avant-garde. In the 50s, abstract expressionism in New York created a new excitement and a highly personal expression after the World War. So that what happened here reflects that as well.
Now, Nina, this picture is really pretty traditional, isn't it? We've got a nice long...
Oh, it is, and this is owned by our very own Franny Taft.
Oh, wonderful.
I believe so.
And of our audience
and perhaps people have seen Gertner's elsewhere, in the Banking Hall of Huntington, for instance.
Oh, great.
So in our lives, these artists have been represented on public walls. In reaction, the 60s ushered in op and pop art, both more direct in their approach to the audience and both provocative. In Cleveland, going back to the 50s, we have almost no abstract expressionist painters, but we have the new thinking that I told you about when Joe McCullough took the reins of the Cleveland Institute of Art at the age of 32. He had studied with the Cleveland Old Guard. That means he studied with Travis, he studied with Keller, he studied with all the people who were there for so long.
And who we visited with in the past.
Right. He graduated in 1948. Then he went to Yale to study with Albers. He taught a course called Color and Light, which replaced the traditional course that had been taught before that. And so his own painting, number one, wins the 1958 May show. It tried to capture an ephemeral idea, an idea of sound.
And is that this painting right here?
Yeah, let's see the next one of Joe McCullough's. No, it was that one before.
Okay.
All right. So the theme of an idea, sound, becomes possible in painting, even though you don't hear paintings, right?
Right.
At the Cleveland Museum of Art, William Millikan retired after 28 years and Sherman Lee took over. And the museum had just become endowed with the Leonard Hanna estate, which increased its purchase power enormously. The May show increased its capacity to show the region's art by expanding beyond Cuyahoga County, and all of that was happening then. It was important that we note in the 60s, this is Ed Mieczkowski, work by Ed Mieczkowski, who's come back to do some more work today. But he represents, in Cleveland, the transition between the old and the new. He studied with all of those people at the Institute of Art and then became a teacher of students for the next 50 years.
Okay.
So, people who have been to the Cleveland Public Library, people who where his mural is right there with the William Summer mural.
Right, we're going to take a look at that in one second.
Will know that, and who remember the Haley wall of his mural. Here's another one called Blue Ford.
Oh, excellent.
That the museum had on the blue-white Ford. That was 1966. The first one was 1962. Here's the wall mural from Haley Brothers, one of 10 such wall murals. Now this has, just tell you secrets about it, has 32 different colors. It was a bear to do. Anybody who remembers Buddy Simon knows that he put up signs, but he wasn't used to doing murals. But he did all the cartoons for these murals, which went up on the wall. And this was right on where the Wyndham Hotel is now,
Okay.
on the old Haley building wall. But it was wonderful. It was there. That's Ed Mieczkowski. But Ed was recognized early, as was Julian Stanczak, who had been away and came back to teach here in New York. They were represented in New York. So it was important that here's the mural from the library downtown, that it's called Summer Sun, S-O-M-M-E-R, which is William Summer, and it's based on his reflection and knowing about the mural that Bill Summer did that's on the other wall during the WPA. And it reflects exactly the same colors.
And this is painted on, Nina?
Yeah, a mural that, yes, he painted the mural.
Different sections, so 4 round sections.
Yeah, and that is a round mural. Those colors are reflected in the William Summer mural that was the only one in that building in the great reading room of the Cleveland Public Library for so long. But Ed really tried to pay attention to what was there and reflects that. So it's sort of like all of history is right in that room.
Right. And it almost looks like stained glass. That's why I love this.
Right, it has that
It's very,
appearance.
yeah.
Okay, Julian Stanczak also did murals downtown. If you remember the Carter Manor building next to the bank downtown. Anyway, the public could see these, so they knew things had changed. All right. Now, at this juncture, we have the need to talk a little bit more about crafts, because we did in the beginning.
Right.
And one of the people that is so important to this is Jim Mazurkowitz. Anybody who now has been the chief metal designer at Potter and Mellon. Potter and Mellon's been around 100 years.
Really?
Yes.
And I thought I was just buying at a new store, selling.
Well, someone showed me a ring that they made in 1929 the other day.
You're kidding.
Yes.
Wow.
But Jim Mazurkowitz is their chief metal designer. Now, the reason he's an important person is that he studied with John Paul Miller and Frederick Miller, and that's at the Cleveland Institute of Art when he was a student, and he decided after working with them that he really wanted to go into metal work. And so the designs for his own work are really, really important. Let me just read you one thing he says about working with them, because it's kind of fun.
Great.
I had John Paul Miller as a design teacher and also took jewelry as an elective class. I seemed to enjoy it, and he suggested that it would be good if I continue. I was able to do that. I found myself fascinated with the materials that I was working with and the tools, and trying to stretch to the limits what you do with gold and silver. And of course, I have the two of the greatest teachers right there at the Cleveland Institute of Art. John Paul Miller, we saw his work a couple of slides ago, and Frederick Miller. They had done a lot themselves. I remember saying to John Paul, why don't you write a book about the research you're doing on the process of granulation, which he didn't want to do because he wanted people to experiment and to experience how gold adheres to metal, which is what that's about. He would deprive them of failures and successes of their own and all the things you'd learn across the way. So it was stories like that that fascinated Jim Mazurkowitz, and he just continued and wanted to go into metal work. And he becomes a teacher at the Cleveland at the Cleveland Institute of Art for years before he becomes the metal craftsperson at Potter and Mellon. So Jim Mazurkowitz is very important.
And right now we're looking at a brooch that Jim Mazurkowitz
Right,
did?
1981, sterling silver. And it is the ring came before.
Right,
that was
let's take a look
his.
at that as well. Here we go. Here's the ring. The picture is not as clear as others I've seen.
Right.
But here's where your finger would go. And there's an opal right here.
Right.
Great. And then this looks like it's gold right here. And is this silver or white gold maybe?
I can't tell you. I haven't seen the ring itself. All I've seen is this bad slide.
Doesn't tell us much of anything.
Right, but he did that in 1972.
Right. And then the brooch has lots of different things in it. It's got silver, gold, a pearl right here.
Quartz, that's quartz.
Right here.
And it was in the May Show,
Oh, it's lovely.
1981.
Wonderful. Now we're going to look at a glassmaker next, aren't we?
That's right, Brent Kee Young. He is a glassmaker who's still teaching at the Cleveland Institute of Art. He's just a fine glassmaker. But look what's happened to glass. We used to think of glass as glasses you drink from or vases that you put flowers in.
Right.
But glass becomes art. After Edwin Eckhart, and we did look at her work before.
Yes, we did look at her.
She opened the window, the door, whatever we want to call it. And so artists today work in glass, and there's a glass store here, a gallery of glass work that's really quite spectacular in the Little Italy School.
Okay, I'm sure some of our viewers have seen
It's Riley
Oh,
Gallery.
Riley Hawk Gallery, yes.
And they've been known all around.
Is this, it looks like sort of a solid, slanted cube almost with lots of, and I've seen glass blown before, as I'm sure many of our audience have also. I'm sure this would have been very hard to construct to get all these colors. There's some blue here and some sort of beautiful rose color and gold down here to get these all condensed into one glass object.
Right.
I'm sure it would have been very difficult to see the skill.
To see how people have worked with glass. We have another glass artist who's working in Kent. The Masked Bandit is the name of this, and that is now in the Corning Glass Museum. Henry Halem works at Kent. See, these people can work here and live here and have studios here and send their work wherever. Many do.
Right.
The next piece is called a figure. It's in the Belkin collection here. Maybe Jules Belkin. You've heard of Jules Belkin, the entertainer?
Sure.
That's probably his collection.
This does look sort of like a little abstracted figure right here. A head, arms, body.
And Henry is someone that I met recently. He's a wonderful person and talks very well about the role of the artist, which he thinks should be important to the future of the earth.
That's great.
No.
Why don't we look at Judith Solomon and then we'll take our first break.
Okay. Judith Solomon's one of the current artists who teaches at the Cleveland Institute of Art. She works also out of a studio and has done wonderful work over the last 20 years, I would say at least, and has, these are exciting pieces, I think. They are ceramic. You think of ceramics in the past. You also can see how each is an art piece all in of itself without putting anything in it.
And this one is called bowl, right? Because although it looks sort of abstracted, this section right here, I guess, would be sort of like a bowl.
Right. And it was in the May Show.
Bowl, but like a square one.
Right. And the next one is called Box.
Oh, that's lovely. I love all of the colors on it.
I once wanted so much to have a piece by Judith Solomon. And so did another patron as we went to this opening of her exhibit. And we decided that each of us should buy it and share it. Half a year for us and half a year for them. We never did it, but I'm very sorry we didn't.
Oh, that's too bad.
It's many years ago.
So, Nina, why don't we take our first break and we'll come back and we'll visit with Michelangelo Lovelace, who I really like. And please type in any questions or comments you may have. We are going to take about a 5-minute break and show you some of the images that we've already seen so far. And we'll see you in a little bit. Okay, we're back, and again, I'm Kelly Williams here with my friend Nina Gibans.
Hi.
And we are talking about the most recent group of artists from our continuing series on regional art. So actually, Nina, we've traveled through a lot of years, and we're actually in the 70s and 80s now, which is very exciting.
Almost up to date. Our next artist is working right in our midst.
That's wonderful. And Nina, we got a great question from June at Judson Park. And June, we hope you're having a wonderful day. She'd like to know the difference between NOVA, Spaces, and the Center for Contemporary Art. 3 organizations which you mentioned at the beginning of your talk today.
NOVA doesn't exist.
Oh, well, that's the first difference.
Well, NOVA was a very important place for artists to be serviced. It started in about 1972, and it started out of the need for the artists themselves to have a place that would have slides of theirs so that people could find their artwork, that would exhibit their work, that would, they had downtown festivals, they had an image resource center where artists could experiment with using types of machinery that they wouldn't, like duplicating machines, that they would not have an experience doing otherwise. They had and they had some public art. Actually, the wall mural project that you saw represented by Edwin Mieczkowski's wall on Halley was a joint project between NOVA and the Cleveland Area Arts Council. Yeah. And so they were advocates and service organization for artists. Spaces started about the same time. Their first space was in the 1375 building on Euclid, and it's always been artist-driven. For the most part, artists, a component of their board has always been artists. The exhibits, I think, are still determined by artists, and although the board has expanded to have other people. The emphasis at Spaces is on new artists, emerging artists, giving a chance to fail and have success. And that's their main agenda. And it's been exciting over the years. They have today, now there, they have an exhibit of artists who went to Europe on Ohio Arts Council grants in the last year and came back with different ideas. It's a wonderful show. They have continuous shows every year. Its director is Susan Channing, who's been there maybe 18 years, I want to say.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And,
and the
Center for Contemporary Art, about to change its name to become the Museum of Contemporary Art on November 1st. The center started with an idea of Marge Talalay and Nina Sundell, and it was to bring cutting-edge artists, new art to Cleveland. And this was the early 70s. That was what they wanted to do then, and now it's the same now. With that component of what they do, they will have artists from all over the world represented in their exhibits. The other thing that they do have, though, is a series called the Pulse series, which is about 4 years old. And that Pulse series gives an opportunity for artists to who are unknown, some known, some more mature artists, meaning in age, so experience, an opportunity they might not have otherwise of showing a retrospective. Not quite a retrospective, because many of them, in a retrospective you've had to be a certain age maybe to go back in time. But some of these are new artists who are trying ideas and who have obvious talent, and they give that opportunity. Right now they have a show of Julie Langstrom, and Julie teaches at the Institute of Art. She tried a series of work on houses.
Hoses like garden hoses?
Houses.
Oh, houses.
As in the house for Peter Lewis that was not built.
Oh, right. Very controversial.
Right. As in Falling Water by Frank Lloyd Wright. She has a piece there related to a Neutra house in California. She has another piece by Meyer the architect Richard Meyer, who did the Getty Museum.
Sure.
All of them are houses, though, and their setting is influenced by our painting here at the Cleveland Museum of Art by Frederick Church, the landscape by Frederick Church.
Sure.
They're all in a very, I would say, spiritual or mysterious landscape. So,
now, Nina, would it be fair to say that the Center for Contemporary Art often brings in sort of bigger shows? Like a few years ago, they had the big pop art show. And that's not something that Spaces would necessarily be interested in?
well, I don't know about the interest level, but I know the emphasis. And the emphasis for contemporary art is to bring ideas to Cleveland that we wouldn't have a chance to see if they didn't do that. And to stimulate our thinking with these cutting edge and they're really stimulating exhibits. You have to think about what you're seeing, and they may be great fun. The one that's there now is about childhood, really, and it's great fun. So artists from all over, I mean, Malcolm Corcoran was from the Columbus when he had an exhibit there.
Okay.
Don Harvey had a big exhibit there, which was a retrospective of 10 years of his work recently, last year. Don now has a piece in the museum here.
That's right, and we're going to take a look at some of his work in a little bit.
In a little bit, right.
Great.
So, and then they had Laurence Channing's work at one point, and Don Lusac. Those are people working in drawing and photography and printmaking.
Okay.
So they've had a variety of exhibits. Does that define that for us?
I think so, yeah.
Well, if you have more questions the next time we break, you can ask.
That's right. Now we're going to start again with Michelangelo Lovelace, who I've met several times and is really an interesting character. I really like him.
He's wonderful. If you ever are in a car and you're traveling downtown toward the city, at about Cedar and 34th Street is a big mural of his. If you're at Huron Road Hospital, that has a big mural of his. And he works in these big forms and mostly about the world he knows. I grew up, this is from Michelangelo, I grew up in a single parent household. I grew up in what my friends call the ghetto of Cleveland, urban inner city. Went through a lot of things young people go through growing up in a single parent household, growing up on a welfare system. So I have a lot of experiences that form my opinions and experiences. I dropped out at 16. I wasn't a bad student, but I ended up doing that because of financial pressures. It was the only way for me to relax, a way for me to get away from the pressures I had. I think it was something God decided for me. It was something I could do easily. Once I decided, Cleveland had the foundation set for me to pursue that goal. It was not like I had to wonder how I was going to make it happen. I just had to have the drive and ambition to make it happen. Being in Cleveland gave me the richness of life experience, so I grew up fast.
So, and when he's saying that it was something God decided for him and something they always had, he's talking about his artwork, right?
Right.
Great.
That he becomes an artist.
And let's take a look at that mural again, because I want to point it out to our audience. This is really sort of like an interesting perspective where we're looking on top of city blocks, but also being able to look at some of the buildings, like the houses right here. And we've got buildings here. All these are buildings. And then these are all streets. And his work often, and I don't know how he'd feel about this, but it reminds me of something like Red Grooms, where we see a city life bustling and happening and the good and bad things of the city life. And it's very colorful and bright and really interesting. All these little things, these little details here are people walking. There's tons of little cars. I think he's a great artist.
Right. It's very much fun to just stand by a piece of his and look at it. He recently had a gallery show.
Oh,
but
great.
he doesn't have that often because, he really works in this size and the best format is the city itself.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Now, we have another mural coming up. Here it is.
All right. And perhaps those people who grew up in Shaker Heights or whatever know Malcolm Brown. Malcolm Brown taught at the middle school.
Oh.
And lots of folks had him as a teacher. but he did this piece of ceramic work, which is a tile work on the Martin Luther King Library of the Cleveland Public Library system. And as you go in the door, you can see this lovely mural, which is based on jazz.
Great. And there are actual jazz musicians here. I see a gentleman holding a bass right here, and there's a guitar right here. This looks like sort of a saxophone, maybe a tenor sax. There's lots of other singers and dancers here, and these are all made up almost like a tile mosaic, aren't they, Nina? Each little piece.
Yes.
Put
It's
together.
very colorful and fun to find on a library front.
Wonderful.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit. Oh, this is Athena Tacha. But we'll talk about one other thing, which is, again, the support systems. Athena Tacha's piece that's coming up, though, is part of this.
Oh, here it is right here. We'll keep this up.
Okay. So in addition to the Cleveland Institute of Art people, the artists come from art departments all over. Kent State, University of Akron. Don Harvey comes from the University of Akron. Kent State was where Henry Halem came from. Cleveland State University, Oberlin College. John Pearson comes from Oberlin College. Many came from elsewhere and found their jobs here. And they keep going back and forth with ideas because of the highway access to nearby cities. During the last 30 years, there were more places displaying contemporary art dedicated to advancing understanding and appreciating today's visual arts. Okay, so in 1972, the Cleveland Area Arts Council existed, and they were a catalyst and facilitator for some of the early public art. This is a piece that is now at Cleveland State University, but it used to be on the Huron Road Mall. It's by Athena Tacha, called Tilted Arches, and she undertook this assignment, which is a smallish piece, and then went on to do pieces under this arch series all over the country.
So this is
was from Oberlin.
Wow, because if I were to stand next to this, I'd only come up to about right here, right?
Well, that's right, but you can go under those arches, which is part of what she wanted people to do.
Wow.
So if you ever go to a music performance at Cleveland State, this is in front of that building. So other organizations were the Cleveland Artists Foundation that began in the mid-'80s, and their great focus is art of this region, honoring past and present artists of this region.
And they've met some of the artists in the works from the Cleveland Artists Foundation with Christopher Bedford.
Right. Kathy Coakley and Don Harvey, whose name keeps coming up, started the Committee for Public Art in 1985. That is a group that took on the programs for public art that came upon this stadium. Stadium art was done by competition and invitation and public process, as was the new building of the Cleveland Public Library.
Right.
So if you're ever in the Cleveland Public Library, there's some of those murals and ceilings by Holly Morrison.
Right.
Beautiful.
And they've actually also met people from Committee for Public Art, which is now called Cleveland Public Art.
Right.
And we had Melanie Fiorito over the summer as a guest, and she's the Associate Director of Cleveland Public Art.
And the other group that is a support group, I consider this an important support group for sculpture, is the Sculpture Center.
Great.
Because all over the city, they've been adopting sculpture pieces to restore.
Right.
Unless a city, and Cleveland has not, had a project of maintenance of their public work, that it needs to be. We know that public work doesn't just automatically stay in good shape.
Right.
Right.
And they've also worked on some of the pieces in our Fine Arts Garden that is just outside of the museum, which people think is really part of the museum, but is actually part of the city of Cleveland. In case any of you were reading The Plain Dealer, I believe it was on Saturday, they had an article about the Fine Arts Garden possibly becoming part of the museum for $1. That's what Catherine Lee Reed would like to offer the city, because we've been really taking care of it, except for the sculpture that the Sculpture Center has been taken care of.
Right, and what that article pointed out was that we have Wade Park And the park was designed by Frederick Olmsted's sons. Now, Olmsted designed the park in New York City, Central Park.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Well, you probably know the Bonnefoy Company and its active program for 100 years.
Right, it's a very active gallery space
Right.
downtown.
So we'd have to say that it's pretty, this regional art community is pretty vital and creative. And artists cover amazing approaches. Here's one that's interesting.
Why don't we take a look at Masumie Hayashi, and then we'll take our second quick break.
Good.
'Cause I just love this piece that's up on the screen.
Now, Masumie is a photographer, basically. And she does her photography in very interesting ways. This is Public Square. The other was the Cultural Garden that we talked about a little bit. And Masumie uses her camera so that you're seeing many perspectives at the same time.
Right. These are all little images, aren't they?
Right, all of them. And you can recognize some of them, and some of them you think, oh, where's that from? But it's all there. It's part of what she sees through the camera and how she puts it together. Love her work. She teaches at Cleveland State. And one of the things that she does focus on is her her family's internment during World War II.
Oh.
It's one of her focuses. But Masumie is a wonderful woman.
And in Public Square, we can see it as well. It looks like a huge sort of funny perspective, but that's because these are all tiny little pictures put together in sort of a collage, aren't they?
Yeah, and there are the pigeons.
Yes.
Plentiful.
Everywhere. So why don't we take another quick break, Nina, and we'll come back, and we only have 3 artists left. I think we're going to be able to get through it all.
I do too.
Great, so we'll see you in about 5 minutes. Hello everyone, we're back. I'm Kelly Williams at the Cleveland Museum of Art with Nina Gibans, and we're just closing our program on regional art, and if you can believe it, we are actually going to get through history. We have 3 artists left. But first, let's take a look at one piece that our friend Judith Judson asked about, and she'd like to know a little bit more about this piece, which she described as a man's face against a gray-white background. So June, we hope this is a piece that you are talking about. Let us know if it's not. Nina, tell us a little bit about this artist again.
Well, Henry Halem teaches at Kent, and his work is nationally recognized. This piece happens to be, where do we say it happened to be?
Oh, at the Corning Glass
Corning
Museum.
Glass in New York State. Corning Glass collects only the best glass work from all over the world. So Henry at Kent is teaching glassmaking, number 1. Number 2, this looks like a relief, a sculpture relief, only it's glass. And that is really what it's about. The second thing is that it looks like its title.
Masked Bandit.
Right. So whatever allegory, story, caption would go underneath it. Why don't you make up a caption?
Right. I don't want to get out of bed, so I put the pillow over my head. I think that's a pretty good one.
Right.
So really what he might have done here, Nina, is made this face out of glass. And when when artists work with glass, it's very soft when it's still hot. And then he could have squished it together like this and just laid other pieces of glass on top. This is what I'm guessing how he made it. But this would be a flat piece, right? So it could be hung against a wall.
Right.
Like a relief, just like you said. So June, we hope that answers your question, but that we think these are sort of flat panels of glass, sort of a milky, opaque glass, and then there's this face, which looks like a face that's actually been sculpted on a human, or sculpted maybe even on clay, or on some sort of plaster mold, and then squished together, so it looks like that.
And my guess is that it's fairly unique.
I have never seen anything like that. And when I saw that, I thought it was clay, because if it was made out of clay, it would be quite easy to manipulate, but out of glass.
I'm assuming because he's a glass artist that it is glass. And because it's in the Corning Museum.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
It's a glass museum.
So let's talk about Don Harvey, who we've mentioned a few times on our program so far.
Yes, we've mentioned Don Harvey, who's not only been an important teacher in Akron, University of Akron, but an important artist of the region. And I do want to read what he says about the influences of this region on him. The landscape of the lake and the flats immediately became a great influence on me. When I moved here, I came straight from graduate school. We were full of theory and ideas about future of art and how we were going to affect it. When I came here, what I found out about myself is that I'm not that kind of artist at all. My art comes from the most immediate influence of my surroundings, and it has been ever since. So industrial landscapes of Akron and Cleveland, eventually evolving into the urban landscape, generally have been my subject matter. They help me realize what kind of artist I am, and also have provided me with subject matter and a lot of stimulating experiences. Now, he talks about being stimulated by the waterfronts, the lake, most specifically, about the environment, the pollution, most specifically. Everything's not pretty in his world that he paints for us, but that's our world and his vision. And that's what Don Harvey is really about. Only recently has he put people in his work.
Now this one is called River and Lake, and let's just describe it to our viewers because it can be a little confusing. This looks like it's a photo over here, but it was printed on aluminum. It seems, and not on a regular photo paper.
You know, one thing that's important to realize about artists today is that every possible medium is available to them. So often they mix them. And Don's a good example of that, of where he uses photography in the beginning to get his images, where he may then make prints, where he may paint, where he may add dimension to it that is another material entirely,
Like
as
this right
in
here.
right, and those are usually filled with interesting water that is polluted.
Right. They're test tubes, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're all individual test tubes.
Right.
And this photo right here is actually of the lake, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's printed in sort of a rose-color ink, so it doesn't look like a black and white photo necessarily, but it is of the lake.
Right. So he's getting his images straight from our environment.
Great. Now, another photographer is Michael Loderstedt, and our audience has heard about Michael Loderstedt before because he did a show through the Cleveland Artist Foundation where he was a curator of contemporary photography, and we presented a show with Shannon Masterson and Christopher Bedford.
And I did a book with him.
Oh, and I think he's a wonderful artist.
He is. Michael teaches at Kent. So in our discussion, we have seen Masumie from Cleveland State. We have seen Henry Halem and Don Harvey, who's now retired from his Akron job, from Akron though. I'm sorry, Henry Halem's from Kent. Michael Loderstedt's from Kent in his teaching world, but he lives here in Cleveland. Well, his is printmaking here. This was part of the invitational that was shared by not only the Museum of Art in 1991, but other, I'm sorry, this did not come from the shared show. This came from the 1991 invitational at the Cleveland Museum of Art. And actually, different parts of it are called different things. And one is called Missing Parts, and one is called, the next one
We'll bring up the next one,
is called Ponder.
and then we have one other one.
Right, Sentence.
Yes. And what he's done here, Nina, it looks like he has 4 photographs put together
Right.
with the same sort of tones and black and white colors and images, but they're definitely 4 different photographs, right?
Michael is one of our more complex, thoughtful, cerebral, as well as multiple dimension in his work. He did a series on Lake Erie that is installed at the Nottingham branch of the Cleveland Public Library.
Oh.
And he then created a book of all the botanical things that had influenced his work as he had projected it, as he did it at that juncture. He lives near there, so he really loves our environment to work from. He says, the impact of the loss of industry has made it possible to work here. I can own a home, have gardens. Local subject matter gives me a metaphor for a broader view, and he is a water person from way back. There's some wonderful stories about spending a day on Lake Erie in a small boat and getting photographs at all times of that day. That was an exhibit down at Spaces.
That sounds like almost what something like the Impressionists would do. They would
Like Monet.
images,
That's right,
throughout
Monet.
the day of the same subject matter.
Right, but he had his camera way high on the mast.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah,
Now our last artist is really neat because he's an employee here.
right.
Yeah.
Laurence Channing is certainly one of my favorite artists. And the reason that I'm so taken with his work is that it's so basic and so calming, and it's so, he makes his own charcoal. I love that idea that he's doing that. So we have prints and drawings. This is 1997, and the Print Club print is 2000. It's a charcoal drawing. So it's just that he takes very careful view of our city, and his drawings are magnificent. It shows how the hand can still be involved with art even though we have computers all over the place, and many artists use computers. in their work.
And his drawings are so realistic because we can definitely tell what this is. This is sort of like a pier, and here's the water, and there are some trees in the background, and here are two little other piers and boats, and here's the texture of the waves, and he's just amazing how he can create that. And it's a drawing, it's not a photograph.
Right.
And the other one I love because I gave it to my friend Christopher, who everybody has met, for Christmas. So I really love this piece. It's a river, and you can see some steeples and things that we would recognize from the Cleveland landscape. You can tell this is a print because you can see the clean white paper here, and this is where the plate would have been pressed down, right here. I didn't draw such a straight line, but you can see some of the ink around it. So that's a really neat print. And that's our last artist.
That is our last artist. Now, some people may want to know where we get this information. There are lots of publications. Not all of them can be taken out of the library. That's the only main problem. But the Cleveland Artists Foundation publications are from the early part of the century, although there's one on abstract geometric abstractions, which is about when we had abstraction for the first time and what those artists have done, like Mieczkowski, and McCullough's in there, and John Pearson's in there, and so that's one of the books. So the books on Cleveland's artistic heritage, there aren't a lot, but there are some to be noted if someone wants to see them in the library as reference.
Right.
But you can buy the books of the Cleveland Artists Foundation.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here today, Nina.
Oh, I am thrilled that we got through this and that that we've had fun doing it.
Definitely.
And that all the mechanical things worked.
Yes, which is a nice treat for us.
I must say the questions have been terrific.
Yep. And I can tell by the questions that everybody's really enjoying.
They really are listening, and they really are thinking about it, and so maybe we'll do another one some other time.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks again for coming.
Oh, you're welcome.
And thank you all for watching today. And please join us on Wednesday when we will be joined by Michael Starinsky, who is from the Education Department, studying different landscapes from our museum, anything from abstractions to the earliest ancient Egyptian landscapes from thousands of years ago. So we'll see you at 3 o'clock on Wednesday. Until then, have a wonderful day. Bye.